How are we looking, John? Everything working?
Myself, John Smith.
No, John Woodward.
Oh, sorry.
Don't worry yet. Sorry, very confusing with so many Johns around.
I wasn't very happy with trying to work YouTube. I got a small picture and didn't know how to enlarge it all. So I've switched to Zoom now.
Yeah, I like Zoom more, a bit more interactive. At least talking one way. Well, we'll give John Woodward a second to get back and get comfy, and then we can make a start.
Ready when you are, Ben.
Okay, all right. We'll just wait till the clock ticks over to 7:30. Give any last joiners a second to get in. And good evening to anyone tuning in on YouTube this evening. Okie dokie. The time is 7:30, so I think we'll look at making a start. Welcome, everyone. It is April now, so we are a shocking, third of the way through the year. How has that happened? I do not know. But it is terrifying. That's the passage of time. And yet here we are to enjoy another talk this evening. We've got John Woodward with us, who has done a number of talks for us before, haven't you, John? I think you're basically a veteran now at this stage of the game in the society. And from what I hear, always absolutely interesting, though for me, this is a first. And we're going to learn about some exciting demolition projects that have taken place in Glasgow over the latter part of the 20th century. No doubt it's going to be a really fascinating hour with one of the country's biggest demolition experts. So, John, thanks so much for coming, and I'll pass over to you now.
Ben, thanks very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for asking me to come back and speak to Womben Scientific Society again. When I spoke to you last about demolition, which I think was 2017 from memory, it was a general talk about the techniques that we use in our industry and how we bring buildings down. Talking to Simon, when he asked for this talk, I've decided that I want to talk to you a little bit more about the 14 years that I spent in Glasgow, working in the city, doing some of the regeneration of the city. So even though this includes some good footage of implosions, and some nice demolition shots, there's also a little bit of history as to why Glasgow was the city that needed the regeneration. Some nice films from Chris Leslie as well, who's chronicled the change in Glasgow over the years. So a little bit of history coupled with the usual footage of blowdowns. So it's a personal memory of 14 years of demolition in Glasgow, 14 years of going backwards and forwards up the M6, or the West Coast Main Line, or occasionally by plane, which I didn't think was going to be 14 years. It can only happen to me. One or two things within here, which you'll see, were fairly unique. And it was, yes, it was a good time. So we'll start first of all, really, with the people that were involved. C&D Consultancy, which was my company, now sold to Mike Keogh, and he's run a C&D Demolition Consultants Limited, based in Liverpool, and doing remarkably well moving forward with the next generation of that company. Very proud to have been a past president of the Institute of Demolition Engineers. That's a position that you're voted into by fellow engineers around the world. So, excuse me, for me to become president was a great honour. And I was president during the time. For my 2-year tenure was during the time we were in Glasgow. Glasgow Housing Association, one of the biggest housing associations within the city. And they were really the people who were instrumental in changing the skyline of Glasgow and getting us all involved within the demolition works. Technical Demolition Services, the first company that I worked with in Glasgow. I was appointed by TDS to assist them on one project, and then following the successful delivery of that project, GHA then went to the other contractors involved and asked if they would take me on their teams because they seemed to like what I did. So the next company I worked with is Coleman and Company, who are based in Great Bar in Birmingham. They were heavily involved. SafeDem, Still work with SafeDem today. I've just recently done some training for SafeDem by Zoom over to Abu Dhabi, where they were doing the blowdown of the tallest concrete structure ever demolished in the world, and is a Guinness Book of Records holder now for that job. That's the Mina Plaza. Demmaster, a local Scottish firm who came onto the framework agreement at a later date. They've got specialist high reach machines, which you'll see in the presentation. An Italian company called Desbay, who we got involved for 2 particular towers, and again are featured in the presentation. But really good to have European collaboration and get people from other countries involved in this scheme. So Glasgow itself. In 1980, when they decided that they needed to do something about the tower blocks, it had a population of 577,869 people. The biggest industries within Glasgow at the time were shipbuilding, without a doubt. And a lot of the people were housed in the towers because that was the best way that the city could house the number of people that they had at that particular time. In 1980, they had 258 tower blocks within the city, and a tower block is classed as any building over 20 stories in height. So 258 towers that people live in over 20 stories in height within the city boundary of Glasgow. They have 50% of all of the 20-story tower blocks in the UK. Now, when I sometimes tell people that, they find that hard to understand, that one city, and bearing in mind, if you say to people, where do you think most of the 20-story tower blocks in the UK are, the majority of people would say London, because it's the bigger area that houses more people. But in fact, Glasgow, as I say, 50% of all the 20-story tower blocks. More tower blocks than any other city in Europe, which again puts it into context. The system worked for them. They were built in the 1960s for a housing need. And because it worked in one area, they then continued to build them throughout the city in blocks of 3, 4, 8. And that's the way it went. All suburbs of the city contained tower blocks. The one thing that was interesting for me when I was in Glasgow was, if we went to the top floor of one of the towers that we were working on and looked round 360 degrees, we'd see probably another 10 towers that we either were working on or about to work on. And some of the views were incredible. You could see from the top of Red Road, for example, you could see right across the Clyde, and you could actually see the Forth Bridge on a good day, the other side of Scotland, because we were so high up. The major regeneration of the city started in the 1980s, because they realised that these towers, when they were built in the 60s, were now reaching the stage where they weren't as efficient as they thought for housing people, and they were starting to become properties that needed a lot of money spent on them. Damp used to run down the walls, very windy. If you can imagine being 23 stories up and the wind blowing in across from the Clyde, they weren't the warmest of places. So they then decided they needed to do something about it. And I think as a nation, we changed housing generally from the 1980s to remove some of the sites that we got and the estates that we got, and replace them with more modern, better housing. So Glasgow Housing Association and New Gorbals Housing Association led the way with clearing the unloved towers to replace them with modern award-winning homes. So they really were the leaders. They decided that they needed to do something, and they started to move this forward. And I'm lucky enough to have worked with both Glasgow Housing Association and New Gorbals Housing. So that's a little bit about the city. A little bit of history now as to demolition. They started in the 1980s removing the towers, and then they used to tender for the work in a particular way, which was common in both the industry and in the country. That has since changed, and I'll explain why. So This date, 12th of September 1993, was a pivotal date in Glasgow for demolition. This was the day that a tower block was being demolished by explosives by a company from America called Wreckers, working with a UK company. And this is the Glasgow Herald report from that day. A woman died yesterday after being hit by flying debris at the demolition of two 22-storey blocks of flats in the Gorbals. 3 other people, one a policeman, was slightly injured among the 2,000 spectators. So 2,000 people wanted to see it. That's fairly common with blowdown events to have large numbers. And I'll talk about the numbers that we've had and how we deal with them later in the talk. But the key thing here is that a woman's died. She's turned up to watch an explosive demolition event, supposedly standing in a place of safety, and has been struck by debris. The dead woman, first of all, they thought that she'd had a heart attack, but Helen Tinney hadn't had a heart attack. She'd been struck by a piece of concrete that had been ejected from the side of the building. And she was married with 4 children. So again, she decided that that day she would go and look at a spectacle that hadn't happened before in Glasgow. And she didn't go home again. And from my point of view, that's awful, even to think about it. The Glasgow Herald said in an interview with the Glasgow Central MP, Mike Watson, he inspected the scene last night and immediately called for a comprehensive inquiry to ensure that such a tragedy does not happen again at the demolition of a tower block. 100%. We cannot have anyone injured when we're demolishing tower blocks. He added, there seems to be little doubt that the woman was struck by flying debris. Something has gone seriously wrong with the explosion. Yes, it had. Too much explosives were used. Too little was used to prevent the material being ejected from the building. And what people sometimes don't realise, and when you look at the footage that I'll show you during this talk, we wrap the buildings extensively with what's called a terran material, which is a woven fabric, which keeps that material in. Because a normal explosion in a concrete building, and this one was a concrete building, would eject material up to 200 meters from the source. So something's gone wrong. The charge has gone off. It's bypassed whatever they had to protect it, and the material has come out and struck Helen and unfortunately killed her. At the time, the council was obliged under local government legislation to accept the cheapest offer considered to be safe. So, irrespective of the history of the company involved, irrespective of any doubts they've got, the first thing that matters is the cheapest price. And then if you look at the 2 last words there in red, considered safe. So who considers it safe? In this case, it's Glasgow City Council consider it safe. And nothing against Glasgow City Council, but if you've never demolished a tower block by explosives, how the hell do you know it's safe? So that really changed what they wanted to do. The successful bid was a consortium involving Wreckers from America, internationally well known, and an English-based company called Ladcarn, who are no longer within the demolition industry. The Independent said, an accident in which a woman was killed by flying debris while watching the demolition of a Glasgow tower block could have been avoided if there had been more safeguards, according to a report published yesterday. Yes, it could. Wholly avoidable. Helen Tinney died from head and neck injuries when she was struck by a piece of concrete during the blasting of the Queen Elizabeth Square flats. So we now know that she didn't have a heart attack. She was struck by the concrete. Unfortunately, she died. The report by Sheriff Archibald Mackay says the incident was caused by the failure of protective shields to stop flying debris and the inadequate extent of the safety exclusion zone surrounding the flats at the time of the demolition. So the sheriff has looked at 2 things. 1, not enough protection to prevent debris, And secondly, is the exclusion zone big enough? And when we talk farther during this talk, I'll explain to you how we decide on the size of exclusion zones. So a decision was made. Glasgow City Council decreed that explosive demolition could not be used again within the city of Glasgow. So that was a major decision when they've got so many tower blocks to come down. And also, price alone will no longer be the criteria for awarding demolition contracts. In future, it will be 40% price and 60% quality. So that's a big shift. We've gone from cheapest price now to price being a factor, but quality being more of a factor. So what can we do then when the redundant towers need to come down? Does that mean that we can't use explosives? Glasgow City Council have said you can't use them. So does that mean we have to have a rethink? Generally, everyone had a rethink. The industry of demolition had a rethink. Glasgow City Council had a rethink as to how they were going to let this demolition work. And they came up with a thing called the Demolition Framework, which meant that a number of contractors were invited to bid for the demolition works, excuse me, not to specify their method of demolition, just that they could demolish the towers. And from the submission, price 40%, quality 60%, a number of contractors were chosen. The initial framework, the contractors were SafeDem, who were based in Dundee, Technical Demolition Services, who were based in Birkenhead in Liverpool, and Coleman and Company, based in Great Bar, Birmingham. So they were the initial people involved. And the idea of a demolition framework was to get early involvement with the contractors so that they have got ample time to plan it, ample time to discuss it, and then come up with a solution from a method point of view, which meets all the criteria that's required from Glasgow Housing Association. Subsequently, that changed to a phase 2 demolition framework, which included, excuse me, SafeDem, Technical Demolition, and Coleman and Company were then replaced by Demmaster, who are based just north of Glasgow. So we've got very competent contractors, very skilled, who get involved now with the client and tell them how they're going to do the works. And it was the duty of each of these contractors to employ someone known in those days as a CDM coordinator, now known as a principal designer. And his job is to get all the information from the client, feed it down to the contractor, get the information from the contractor, feed it back to the client, to be a little bit of a conduit between the two, and to oversee the demolition works, and to give what we call third-party sign-off, so that it gives the client a comfort that someone else has looked at the method statement that's been produced. And I was appointed by Technical Demolition Services on the phase 1 works to do the work at Site Hill. So that's how I got involved. We subsequently got involved in other things, but initially just on Site Hill. So I was appointed as a consultant to TDS. And the reason I got the job was I'd worked with TDS previously on demolishing the first 2 oil rigs to come out of the North Sea, which we did in Shetland. And we had a good relationship there, myself and Tony Tappel, who owns the business. And Tony appointed me to assist on Site Hill. I was subsequently appointed as consultant on all of the Glasgow schemes because GHA felt that the way that myself and Mike Keogh, who was my right-hand man at the time, and Les Hemmings approached the job, which was a collaboration, discussion, and keeping everybody in the loop, was what they really wanted. We take the view that we're not confrontational. If there's a problem, then we solve it. And from that, we were lucky enough to be appointed to the other contractors, and that was on the recommendation of GHA. So from our point of view, that's ideal that their client actually went to them and said, we like what you're doing, we don't have a problem with the consultants you've got, but would you consider using C&D because we think that they're bringing something different. So, with Site Hill Phase 1, explosive demolition is the agreed route, but that method's been banned in Glasgow. So we then went into extensive consultation with GHA and the Health and Safety Executive to agree a plan of work to reduce risk to the public to what the HSE called ALARP, ALARP, so as low as is reasonably practicable, which meant we had to demonstrate that we could deal with the two major issues that Glasgow Housing had got, which is containment of debris and exclusion zones, before we could convince them that we could do a blowdown. We did convince them. So we were TDS were the first company to be appointed to use explosive demolition following the death of Helen Chinney. So just before we go to talk about the demolition itself, this is a film from Chris Leslie, who's got a website called Disappearing Glasgow. And what Chris does, he's over the last 15 to 20 years, he's gone into a lot of the sites which are being redeveloped and has taken some, what I consider to be remarkable images of showing the buildings and interviewed people who live there as to why the towers are coming down and why they're being replaced. I'm using a couple of Chris Leslie films because I think as a filmmaker, personally, I think he's really underrated, and the stuff he produces is quality. So this is his, for Disappearing Glasgow, this is Not Built to Last, and it's all about Site Hill.
We're only supposed to be up 40 years anyway, so that's over 40 years I've been up now. So I think they've served their purpose, served their time. Flats were great because all your pals are in the same flat, so you didn't need to move 40 to get to your pals. And the next side of the flat was always more pals, you'd go and make dens, and it was good, it was great. It was a great place at the time, and that's a wee bit different. Once the scheme's done, hopefully it's get built back up to a better standard than it is just now, and back to normal. It was 25 years ago when I initially came here. I like to push a button, and I would kind of be disappointed that I'm pushing a button, because that'd be the last memories I'll have of Site Hill. It'd be quite heart-ripping, to be honest with you. Right, rip my heart at me. But I like to push a button just to see not see the blast, but see the actual what's going to happen in the years to come and how it's going to be. And hopefully it's a better place, I say.
First moved to Site Hill in 1977. Came here after living in Kelton in the East End of the city. They were pulling everything down, so people were being dispersed to the schemes, the peripheral schemes, or this was the alternative for us. Had never heard of the place, and it was like a completely different world. There was more a sense of community if you were a child, I think, because you know, you went to school in the area and you would get to know, therefore, a lot of other kids your age. I'd get to know maybe their mums and dads through going to their houses. At that point as well, there was still a supermarket in the area, so obviously all, you know, the women in the area would go there to do their weekly shop. There was a really good butcher's. I used to really look forward to going to the butcher's with my mum on a Friday because it was a really good laugh listening to the patter. things probably started to decline when you get into the 80s. For me, a pivotal moment was, and it seemed as if it almost happened overnight, round about 82, being 16, and heroin becoming really commonplace, and folk coming into the scheme who were drug dealers, and you know, your mates and things like that getting involved in it, people getting ill because of it, and then gradually a lot of the old people were dying as well, or moving away into care homes, and they were being replaced, I have to say, with people that were single person households. A lot of unemployment as well. Earlier at one point in the morning there was no point in waiting in the lift because they were so busy with folk going to work, and then, you know, by the 80s that was not the case, so people were coming and going. It was a very much a transient community. So I think what happened was you ended up with an estate that became very much a sink estate, and that's the way it was looked at by the council. For me, it became crucial to move out of Sighthill once I became a parent. Before that, it was somewhere to put my head. I knew everybody. I knew the good people, I knew the bad people, and I was quite streetwise, but the thought of bringing a child up here was not something that I relished at all. You know, we had issues with drug addicts in the block, going out into the landing, and there was people in the landing hitting up, and it just wasn't somewhere that I wanted to bring up a child. So for me, you know, the main goal in life was finish uni and get a house elsewhere to get him out. I've got mixed feelings about the buildings coming down. I'll be sad, but in essence I'll be really, really happy as well. I don't think the buildings have been well maintained. I think they're an eyesore. Even when Sighthill was fully occupied, you could walk across some parts of the estate and not see anybody, and it'd be a really, really creepy place. Kids will always find something good to do with an environment and something positive about it. But I think you start to see things differently as you grow older and you start to have aspirations. And I don't think Sighthill is a very aspirational place. I think you can feel quite trapped by it.
People of Sighthill remember it as it was, high-rise flats. We had underfloor heating and we had double glazing, and that was in the early 70s. We thought, wow, I'm living in this fantastic house. We didn't think about the dampness or the wind coming through, gaps or anything then. Just a pity there was no investment put in Sighthill when the council had the housing stock. It's crumbling away. I did see in the high-rise flats that my 3 kids were born and getting blown up, and it was very, very sad. But then again, when you think of the regeneration of the area and what they could do in this area, what kind of housing they could do, and bring it back again to the way it was in the late 60s, early 70s, and I would come back. But until then, I've done my time. I've done 39 years, and I think that's long enough. Sighthill's where I had the best times of my life and the worst, but it's in your blood, and anybody that belongs here who stayed here way back then, I'll always say that there's something special about Sighthill. And I know it's got bad press, and I know there's a lot of bad people here, but there are a lot of good people as well.
As I say, that's Chris Leslie film, disappearingglasgow.com. If you got time, perhaps have a look. I believe he produces some fantastic images. The couple there that were poignant for me was the one who'd wallpapered his flat with leaflets he got from the local supermarket. That's probably all he got to wallpaper it with, but it was his flat and that's what he wanted. So why did we want to blast it? Why did we decide that we needed to blast it? The Glasgow to Aberdeen rail line is within 20 metres of the block. So for us to do it with traditional methods, there's a possibility that something may escape onto the rail line, which is unacceptable. Network rail would only allow demolition when the line was closed. So traditional machine demolition to take that block down would have been about 20 weeks. So obviously you can't close the Glasgow to Aberdeen rail line for 20 weeks. and Glasgow police wanted to deter spectators following the Helen Tinney tragedy. So they wanted to know that we could manage it and could deal with the spectators. So a great photo there of Japanese knotweed. If anybody knows anything about gardening, you'll see that Japanese knotweed in the foreground, which was imported into this country by some people who went over to places like Japan back in the Victorian times and bought it in as an ornamental plant, which has now taken over half of the UK. But you can see from the photograph in the bottom left-hand corner there, the rail track going into a tunnel. And there are the first two blocks on Site Hill Phase 1 that we intend to blast and blast them because of the rail line being closed. We needed to close the line at night. So not only is it the first time that explosives have been used in Glasgow since Helen died, but it's the first time that they've ever been used in Glasgow in the middle of the night. But we had no alternative with shutting the line. So time to say goodbye. And again, another great image from Chris Leslie. You can see there, that's leaflets from the free paper, beef burgers on the right-hand wall there that he's used for photographs for wallpaper. So showtime, as we call it. We get ourselves ready and then we go. This image is from Phase 2 of the Site Hill. After Phase 1, Glasgow Housing decided that they wanted to do something with the blocks to entertain the people who turned up to watch it in the middle of the night. So we projected images onto the side of the blocks, GHA images and Technical Demolition Services images, which you'll see in one of the blowdowns. So this is Phase 1. This one button on this, a lot of people say to me that, why don't you push the button? Well, I'm not really an explosives engineer. I'm a fully qualified explosives engineer, member of the European Federation of Explosives Engineers, but I don't actually charge the blocks. Those are done by explosives engineers. This one, John Faulkner and Robin Rushforth for PDC were involved in it. And yes, I suppose, it would be nice in some ways to say, yeah, I'm going to push it, but other people should have that opportunity and that chance. So my wife Jill pressed the button on this one. Probably one of the biggest adrenaline rushes out, because as you do the countdown and you come down to 5 seconds to go, your heart almost stops when you're waiting for it to go. So these are the two blocks very close to the rail line. The block on the left-hand side of the photograph is going to move slightly forward into the middle of the photograph to go into a car park. And you can see there just in front of that block, a school, which we had to miss, as well as missing the rail line. And then the one on the right-hand side has to go into the gap between the two. And the gable end on the right of the picture that you can see is the one that's the closest to the rail line at 20 metres, which John Faulkner and Robin had to pull over. And they did this by using a system called the hotshot system, which is computer generated, which allows them to put the timings on the explosions. I did say to you that when Helen was killed, it was a lot of explosives used to bring down the blocks, and that is the way the other side of the Atlantic. In the UK, smaller charges, but more of them. So you'll hear a lot of bangs on this one, a lot of small charges going off, and then you'll see the buildings move. So demolished by PDC, and as I say, my wife Jill pressed the button. So we did the two next to the rail line. The only thing that blew onto the rail line was a piece of wallpaper. So on that basis, Glasgow Housing said, well, okay, let's do the next block. Again, quite close to the rail line, decided that we would go with explosives. So this is Phase 2. This is November 2009. Again, this is in the middle of the night. So for Phase 1, we had 3,500 people out in the middle of the night watching. This one, about the same. The slight difficulty with this one was that we got some shops in the vicinity that the one shop, which was an Indian restaurant, wanted to remain open until 1 o'clock in the morning. And we really wanted him shut about 9 o'clock so we could close the exclusion zone. But I remember vividly going down to discuss with him that we needed him to move out. Excuse me. And he said, Saturday night is my biggest night for takings. And I said, well, what about if we agree to pay you for the equivalent takings that you lose? And then will you close at 9 o'clock? And he said, yes, that's not a problem. And I said, okay, then. So if you tell me what you take on a normal Saturday night, then I'll put it to TDS and we'll see what we could do. And I was expecting to say he took about 1,500 quid. And this Asian gentleman with a Scottish accent said, I take 20,000 quid every Saturday night, mate. And I thought, no, I don't think you do. But obviously he was adamant that he didn't want to close. So we let him remain open. We shepherded people in and out of the exclusion zone, which we can do. Just put the right controls in place. But I must tell you that while we were shepherding people in and out of the exclusion zone with the police involved, we saw at one point a vehicle coming down the road going towards the Indian takeaway and driving down quite quickly. And he was then surprised to be stopped by the police to ask where he was going. And at that, he said he was going for his takeaway. And the police officer leaned into the window and said, have you been drinking, sir? And it turned out that he had. He asked him to blow in the bag and he blew twice the legal limit. So going to fetch his curry quickly before we blew the buildings down cost him his license. So this is phase 2.
Where did they go? You're just going to miss it, aren't we? Aye. I think Lindsay's car might be a bit of a different colour when you get there. That was quite impressive.
That was. I jumped.
Pleased to say that they said there that was quite impressive. This is phase 3. Same again, Sight Hill, the middle of the night. Again, because of the rail line being close. This time it's 3 towers. So we started with 2. We did 2 the second time. This is 3. So at the end of this one, we've got 7 that have gone down in the same area. So that just for 1 second there doesn't want to play. Just bear with me. We had this problem yesterday with this. See if it'll go this time. Yeah, it should go this time.
Troy wants to get in there. When he gets to 10, I will sound the air horn.
Ten, 9, 10 seconds to go down, 10 seconds to go down. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire. Fire.
The one thing we are good at in Glasgow is making dust, as you can see.
My name is Kelly O'Rourke. I'm the Resident Liaison Officer for Technical Demolition Services. Well, Technical Demolition Services have been employed by GHA, who are working alongside Glasgow City Council with the regeneration project here at Sight Hill, and we've been employed specifically to take down all of the high-rise flats that have been situated here for many years. Obviously, it's not just a case of when you're demolishing that you just start taking the building down. There's a lot of internal work that needs to be done first. So we would employ our staff to go in and actually basically gut every single room and part of the building out. This is everything that can be skirting boards, cupboards, light fittings, smoke alarms, anything at all that we feel would be a danger or a threat while we are demolishing. That is quite a long process, but most of the stuff that we do take out of the buildings, most of it is actually recycled. The last thing we do take out is the windows, and we do that specifically so that when we are taking out everything within the building, we try and keep the dust and noise contained within the building so that we're not disturbing any of the local residents. Well, we're using a method with the super high reach machine, which is one of the largest actual super high reach machine in Scotland, and it basically, you work from the top of the building, working your way down in sections where you're actually taking chunks of the building out with the jaws of the demolition machine. Well, my role specifically is what it says, it's to liaise with the community. So that would be the likes of, at the moment, it would be the local facilities, would be the schools which are nearby, church, any of the local residents meetings, any meetings with the local contractors, Glasgow City Council, GHA itself. So I would be a person who people would come to if they have any questions, queries or any issues that they want to raise. Well, we are thinking that demolition work will be completed October. That will be completely finished here, so that's not just including the demolition of the buildings, it'll also be the groundwork which we're employed to do before the other contractors come in.
So the initial ones were done with explosives alongside the rail line. As we moved away through the estate, then the rest of the towers can then be done with a high reach machine. Having been appointed for TDS, I was then appointed for Coleman and Company to work on flats at Ibrox Home. And so this one is Ibrox Home, very near to the Ibrox Stadium, Rangers Stadium. And this is the first time that a high reach machine had been deployed north of the border. This is the Coleman machine, which was the first high reach of its type in the country. And you can see there in the photograph, we've got a crane holding what looks like a large shower curtain. And that's really made of light mesh reinforcement, which means that anything that ejects from the side of the building when the machine is munching, it hits the screen and then prevents it going into the dual carriageway, which was quite close to that. So first ever use of a super high reach. Very tight to rail lines and a dual carriageway, so its own problems which we have to solve. Simple. And as I said, the crane's holding the demolition screen. Stayed with Coleman then to do Riverford Road. This one is again an explosive demolition. The tower on the right of the photograph there, you can see has had part of it removed by crane and small machine, because of the proximity to a local school. It was within 15 metres of an infant school that had to stay in place. So we took a slice off the building all the way down and then left it for blowdown. Different sort of explosion you saw on that one, a different choice of blasting technique, because those towers had got very heavily reinforced lift shafts in the middle, We then went with high reach when Demmaster got involved with their super high, as well as TDS's super high. This is Demolition Iona Court. And what we do here is use the high reach machine to munch away. So he's got a jaw on the top of that machine, which pulverizes the concrete. Water is fed up the boom of the machine to keep the dust down, and he just works away nice and steady. The driver has got a reclining seat, and he can look at the TV camera, which is mounted on the boom, excuse me, so he can see the jaw working on a TV in his cab. But most of the high reach drivers tend to just look up at the attachment working because they're so used to it. And again, you can see there he's reducing it by cutting back to the main shear walls and back to the lift shafts, which is where the strength of the building is. This is a better photograph of it working. You can see there that the machine can adequately reach that. He's in a good position for that, and the cab of the machine is far enough away that any debris that falls from the tower obviously doesn't fall onto the machine. Excuse me. This is another blowdown now. This is Gorbals Housing Association. So this one is a Sunday morning evacuation. The building that you can see just underneath where the arrow is to start the video, just underneath that, there's a grey roof building. That's the one of the main court offices for Glasgow with a glass frontage. So obviously we couldn't do any damage to the glass frontage. And just off the frame on the right hand side is the local mosque. So we spent a lot of time discussing with the mosque that we wanted to do the demolition on a Sunday morning, as we do with the local churches. They were very good, and we managed to move this forward. When this film starts, because it's a YouTube film put up by someone who filmed it at the time, he obviously didn't know when the blowdown was going to occur. So I'm going to let it run for a while, and then I shall fast forward it to when the actual blast occurs. Classical music for because it is a little bit theatrical at times, and maybe again you can see very good at producing dust. All we can do with that is do our best to move it. Yes, it's a lot of dust on the day, but if we were doing it traditionally by machine, you would have the same amount of dust but over a 26-28 week period. Full evacuation of the area, keep people out of the way, and then down as well. So that's Gorbals Housing Association. Again, delighted to have won that on competitive tender and to be appointed by Gorbals to be their consultant on that. That's a Safedown job. William Sinclair and David Sinclair, the blasters on that one. Do a lot of work with William and David. It's a classic blowdown, really came down nicely in its own footprint, leaning slightly to one side as he came down, as you saw. But again, a nice job as far as we're concerned. I just need to let this run itself out, and then we can go on to the next one. So that's Gorbals Phase 1, Norfolk Court, as I say. We'd moved on to 2010, so a fairly hectic 3 years. Started in 2008 and moved quickly forward 2010. Gorbals Phase 2. This is where one or two of the personal things come into it. The blast was delayed by 55 minutes. We had we had an agreement that we could close the rail track to do the blast. So we did it in what they call a window. So we close it for a set period of time, drop the building, and then the trains run again, rather than an overnight closure at Sight Hill. We delayed 55 minutes because we had to wait for the Royal train to pass. We got the authority to close it for 3 hours, but when the Royal train needs to use the line, then that authority is overruled. So you can be ready to go with the blast, but if the Royal train's coming through, then you have to stop. The train was diverted because our section of the track was a smoother ride for Her Majesty. And as a royalist, I'm really happy to delay proceedings for our Queen and Prince Philip. And the next photograph is a great photograph of them getting out of Glasgow station. Prince Philip looks remarkably well there, and such a shame that we lost him last week. I must say, though, with this, that I can't believe that the Queen has gone back to her royal duties so quickly after the death of her husband. I think that's absolutely unbelievable for a lady of her age to do that. And this is something that I needed to put in. This is, again, off YouTube. This is Norfolk Court Phase 2. So you've just seen Norfolk Court Phase 1, which is the one at the front. This is the building behind it. And the gentleman who was filming this decided that he got the best vantage point, which was right outside the court building, for him to film the actual blowdown and put it up on his YouTube channel. You don't see every day a bus blocking your view. Right, we now move on to Rosemount, which is near the motorway. So on Rosemount, we didn't have rail tracks to contend with. We had the M8 motorway, which we had to shut with a rolling road for blast. So phase 1 was scheduled for the 1st of December 2013. The block was fully charged and ready to go on Thursday. So everything's in place. We've got final connections to do, but we do those on the Sunday morning. Or this is Safe Dem, William Sinclair, David Sinclair. The blowdown was set for Sunday, the 1st. And on that basis, I drove home on Thursday night to pick up Jill. And we drove back up on Friday, the 29th, because when it's a blowdown weekend, Jill tends to come up with me. She will then perhaps do a bit of shopping in Glasgow on the Saturday while I'm doing what I need to do on the last day. We then go out for a meal on the Saturday night with parts of the team, and then she will come to the blowdown on Sunday morning. I'm in at 4 o'clock, and then either a cab will take her to the blowdown for about 11, or I might, if I've got time, go and fetch her. But so anyway, we drove back up on the Friday night. We normally stayed in the Holiday Inn on Stockwell Street for blowdowns, but for some reason with Rosemount, I decided to change to the Premier Inn George Square, which is about 1.5 miles up into the city. I think I might have changed because it was better for Jill for getting to where she wanted to go. I can't remember why we changed, but we did. As we walked from the car, the car park for the Premier Inn at George Square is over the road. So we parked up, picked up the bags and walked from the car. And I heard the helicopter above us, and I'm well used to the noise of helicopters because we use them on all blowdowns. They're invaluable for us with controlling the blowdowns on the day. And I said to Jill, that helicopter's got a fuel problem. It will be going back to base because the engine didn't sound as though it was running correctly. the only way I can describe this is you might perhaps go into Womben tonight, tomorrow, and you'll hear a car that backfires because something's wrong with the ignition, or so this is similar. So we've got a sound that doesn't sound right to me when I'm used to listening to helicopters all the time. So I said to Jill, he's got a fuel problem, he's going back to base. It actually crashed about 10 minutes later into the Clutha Bar. So the police helicopter, the pilot was trying, they think, to put the helicopter down in the river because he knew he'd got a problem and he needed somewhere to put it. And the best place to put it is the River Clyde, which is 50 metres from the Clutha Bar. But unfortunately, he didn't make it. It came down on the roof of the bar. It killed 8 people that night and injured 31 others. So we've got a major incident in Glasgow, an absolute disaster. Directly opposite the Holiday Inn. And I often say to Jill, if we'd have gone to our normal hotel that night, then I would have been across the road trying to help with what was happening there because it crashed into the Clutha. So terrible. Sunday's still got to go ahead because we've got a tower block full of explosives, but we've got no air support. So the police on duty for us on Sunday they're bound to be traumatized from the events of the Friday night. And the inspector who was in charge for the blowdown, he'd been at the Clutha Bar all Friday night. So you can imagine the emotional turmoil that these police had gone through, but they'd still got to get on with their job because we can't do anything with that tower. We could have delayed it for maybe a week, but it doesn't bring us a helicopter back, and it gives us the problem of having a tower block fully charged for a week. So we rearranged our searches. We used more dogs to compensate for the loss of the helicopter, and the blast went off without a hitch. But sometimes it's hard to understand how people can remain focused on their job when so much is going on in their heads. I make a point on any blowdown because I don't charge. I'm not involved in charging. I've done my work within the block days before. On the day, I'm making sure the exclusion zone is secure and we're managing the people correctly. And I always make a point of talking to the police who are on sentry duty for us. And every one of them I spoke to that day were almost in tears to think that they'd lost 2 colleagues and the number of people that have been killed in the Clutha. So Police Scotland was superb for us that day. At times the police get criticised, in my view, unfairly, but I will say that that day they were brilliant for us. So this is phase 1. You'll see on this, when the dust cloud starts to roll down the hill towards the camera, you'll see William Sinclair, the explosives engineer, who you can just see in the clip at the moment with a yellow jacket on. You'll see him duck behind the house so that he keeps out of the way of the dust cloud. So this is phase 1.
Here it comes. A video taken by John Young there from the safe area away from where we're working. This is phase 2, May 2016.
the second part of that film, you saw the camera wobble slightly from the what they call the air overpressure. When we drop a building, that's again a William Sinclair and SafeDem, David Sinclair job. That one's a little bit, I suppose, underwhelming. It just comes down quite nicely, that one. Not as spectacular, but that shows it's a good job. But then obviously it forces the air out. The air that's contained within the building gets compressed and is then forced out sideways. And that's called air overpressure. And that is what can possibly break windows. And you see there, it affected the camera. This is phase 3. This was also a strange one for us. We got the block charged and ready to go on the Sunday morning. So we're all ready to go. Jill didn't come up for this one. By now, she's probably blow down out. She's seen enough. So I was up there on my own. And tenant evacuation was going well and on time. When we had a call for one of the evacuation team, asked me to go to property 27. When I arrived, I found the evac member, team member with a distraught Polish lady who seriously ill father, who lived in the property with her, had passed away about 10 minutes before we knocked on the door. So we've now got a situation of a tower block full of explosives, an ongoing evacuation and a domestic tragedy to deal with. We changed the evacuation order to keep people away from the area. We arranged escort into the area for a doctor, relatives who needed to see their father, brother, uncle, and then for the undertakers to go in and do their work. So tragic, but we need to deal with it sympathetically and then move on with getting other things done at the same time. We needed to get the building down. So how do we deal with such an event without causing problems to the blast? We took the decision quite early on in these programs that we would deal with things differently. So at one of the last team meetings, which is normally the Tuesday before the Sunday blowdown, one of the client team, so it's never me and never the police and never the contractor, puts a sealed envelope in the middle of the table at the end of the meeting with a scenario in it that may happen. And we as a team have to discuss how we will deal with that event. So it could be that we can't get the railway closed, for example. So we might have to postpone it for 7 days. But it means that we focus on the fact that we do something. For Rosemount phase 3, the envelope scenario was, what happens if a resident is taken seriously ill or worse, passes away during the evacuation? Unbelievable that someone had thought it might happen, and then a few days later, it happens. We believe to ensure things go well, you have to consider the fact that we might fail, and we actually rehearse for failure. A lot of people, when I talk about this, find this extremely strange, that they can never anticipate that you might fail. You react better to issues, and over the years we've had a few where we've had to react. and I spend a lot of my time now I'm semi-retired, going around the country talking to companies, for example, about planning to fail. I'll give you a few simple examples. In my wardrobe at home, even though I'm semi-retired, is a rucksack packed with essential things that if I was called to an emergency demolition in the middle of Wolverhampton tonight, everything I need is in the sack. I don't have to run around the house. The things that aren't in there, my car keys, my phone and my wallet, because they stay with me. But everything else that I may need, a change of underwear, clean socks, toothpaste, medication, etc., is in what we call a grab bag, and then you just pick that up and out the door you run with it. So you've got to consider that things might go with that. I talk to companies about backing up things. You'd be amazed how many large companies don't back up their data on their computers. They don't store it separately. What happens if you have a fire? Have you got the data stored separately if you need it? So I spend a lot of time now talking about things that could go wrong and planning for that. I'm also a bit of a list maker. Jill says I'm too much of a list maker, but I've always been a list maker. And I think if you do make a list and you think of the things that I'm not saying you stay awake all night thinking of the worst scenario. That's not what happens. But how are you going to deal with things? Some things you cannot change, and some things you can by your actions. So we look at what we can do. So we did we managed to get the evacuation done. We dealt with the tragedy with the family, and then we were ready to blast. When this film runs, I have to let them all run to the end because of the fact that I'm showing them off YouTube. And if I don't, it then means that it throws a glitch in the presentation. So you'll see at the end of this, somebody who you might recognize who's just directing the traffic, because at that point he's got nothing else to do. And it about sums up what this man does on a Sunday morning. He's just wander about with his hands in his pockets and occasionally directs the traffic. On a Sunday, just to walk about with my hands in my pockets. Plain Street, I'm not going to show you this video particularly, but that's a great image of Plain Street. Right by the Clyde, you can see the shipyards on the left-hand side at the back of the terrace houses. And those were up on a hill. So particularly high flats, those. Great view from the top. Now we got to Topside Oval. This one was strange in as much as 4 blocks. One of them can be done by machine, which you can see there in the photograph. So Dem Master's machine working on that. And then 3 need to be brought down by explosives. So again, we've got the block charged on the Sunday and ready to go. The searches are done and the exclusion zone is cleared. And the helicopter was doing its final pass. And the police helicopters have got like a heat-seeking radar. And when he so he was going around seeing if we got anything, and he found a heat source in one of the buildings. So it's always, they then radio down to us to say we've got a heat source. So from our point of view, we think we've got a cleared exclusion zone, but we obviously haven't, because they picked up something that's alive that's giving out heat. It could be a person, so we hold the blast cordon and we send the police and the explosives engineer, William Sinclair and David, go back in. The police go in with dogs to see what we can find. And as the dogs approached the block, they started barking like crazy, and a fox, which turned out to be our heat source, ran out of the block across the exclusion zone and jumped into the cemetery. So it proves that the heat source radar works because it'll pick up a fox. But from our point of view, we were pleased that it wasn't a person. So blowdown is then back on track. So this is the 3 blocks. So again, that successful blowdown. Now we switch to a different method. This is the Gallagher twins. Called the Gallagher twins by the people in Glasgow always term these as the Gallagher twins, identical blocks in obviously the Gallagher area of Glasgow. And these were different from a demolition point of view. The tallest residential concrete towers in Europe, not just in the UK, in Europe. The residents in the low rise below have got to stay in place while we do the demolition. Difficulties with the tenancies, difficulties in finding them somewhere else to go. So Glasgow Housing Association was adamant that the residents stay in. And a rail line within 20 metres of one tower. You've noticed by now with this talk that me and rail lines seem to have some sort of attraction to one another. Every time I want to get involved in a blowdown, I've got a rail line somewhere close to me. Possible methods available, blowdown, no, because we've got residents who have to stay in place underneath us. High reach machine, no, because we haven't got room for the machine to sit away from the block, because if he sat in the correct position, he'd be in someone's lounge. Traditional top down with small machines, no, because of the scaffolding issues. So what can we use? Could we use Jenga? Could we pull a section out and bring it down like that? That was a great picture that someone put up at the time when the consultation was going on. Someone within Glasgow put that on Facebook, and I thought, that's brilliant. It's a great idea. We'll just slide it out at a time. One of the problems we had with the Gallagher twins, and which you sometimes have with demolition, is that the drawings that we got from Glasgow City Council as part of the contract showed that we got a 26-storey, 26-storey tower blocks. When we actually went to site, we'd actually got 2 30-storey tower blocks. So they designed to build them to 26 stories, but actually built them to 30 stories. So my comment there is investigate, don't speculate, have a good look. So we've got a bigger block in each case than we thought we had. After many days of discussion, and I mean many days, backwards and forwards from Glasgow, sitting down, looking at all the options, we decided to use a new technique to the UK called top-down way. This was developed in Italy by Despe, licensed to Safedem in the UK. It's an engineered structure placed on the top of the block that allows demolition inside an envelope. So no noise and no dust. So it's almost like the 2 tower blocks wear a giant shower cap, which keeps everything in place on top of the towers. We sent an engineer over to Italy to teach the Italians UK legislation, obviously via translation, so that they were up to speed when they arrived. And all the machinery came from Genoa to Felixstowe Port, and then from there up to site. When on site, we found a local family-run Italian restaurant for the team to use at lunchtime, because the main meal of the day in Italy is lunch. And this simple thing made the lads feel at home as much as they could do. And I think that's what you need to do when people are in an environment that's very strange to them, in a country where they don't speak the language and where things are difficult. If you can give them something that makes them feel at home, then they perform so much better. We used dual language signage throughout and spent time learning key phrases in Italian and Glaswegian. So the Glaswegians learned some Italian phrases and the Italians learned some Glaswegian. And the best part for me of the system, there's an office on top of the engineered structure, and in that office is an Italian coffee machine. So when you get 30 floors up in the air to see what's going on, you can walk in and have a fantastic espresso. The contract saw GHA, SafeDem, Desbay and C&D win the World Demolition Award for collaboration. This is one of the proudest nights of my demolition career, that in the world we were judged the best for collaboration. And I think that sums up what C&D Consultancy did and what C&D Demolition Consultants Limited now do. We collaborate, we get people to work together as a team, and teamwork is what makes the thing move forward. So top-down way, a tower crane is erected at the side of the towers, and it lifts up the large structure which we then build on top of it. And that's a great photograph which is off the Desbay website, taken from the cemetery the other side of Glasgow, and you can see the top-down way structure on the left-hand one of the Gallowgate twins there. This is what it looks like. This is a still from a film by Demolition News. I'm not going to show you the film particularly, but it's a still, and you can see from that's taken by their drone, that we've got this structure on the top. You can see where the SafeDem banner is. That's 3 floors deep on the side there, and there's a rubber seal that attaches that framework to the building, so no dust escapes and no noise escapes. And that's what it looks like when it's actually up there. And the way that it works is that it walks its way down the tower. So the structure itself is reinforced to make sure it'll take the weight of the engineering structure on top of it. The engineering structure sits on a large number of jacks, and then those jacks are used to bring the structure down. So what we do is we break out the walls of the particular floor we're working underneath the orange structure. We then break out a floor section underneath one of the jacks. So we lift the jack up, we break out the floor where the jack is, and then we lower the jack down to the floor below. And it's suspended on a number of jacks. We move the jacks one at a time, which means it then works its way down. Smaller machines are used, but larger attachments, which means they can do more work up in the air. And this photograph shows the yellow are the jacks supporting the steelwork. And if you look at those 4 jacks in a line, if you take jack number 2 working from the left-hand side, we would lift that jack up in the air, break that section of floor out, and then send that jack down to the floor below, so that it's always in contact with the structure, but it allows us to walk the framework down. And the machines all work away nice and steady with no noise. We bring it down as we go, and then eventually when we get down to a level such as this one in the photograph, we can then bring in a machine to finish the work. And that's a photograph taken from our old website of Mike Keogh on the left and one of the other guys who works for us on the right, looking up at the top-down way. And a good photograph from Desbay's website. Number 1 is down to 4 stories, and number 2 is just about to make its way down. So top-down way, safe demolition, no accidents, no noise, no dust. And this is how it works. Oh, sorry, jumped. This is a film taken of the top-down way being used in Lyon in France, but it shows you how it works. developed by Despair, now used by SafeDem in the UK. Right, so CDM, Construction Design and Management Regs, is the key. Principal designer, which is what we do. Our job is to monitor, plan, manage, coordinate. So from our point of view, we're talking to everybody, we're passing information to everybody, we're sifting that information to make sure they can all do their jobs. Right, I'm conscious that I've been talking to you now for well over an hour and 20 minutes, and I apologise if we're running on, but I thought we'd get some nice footage in. So this is Red Road. This is the most famous flats within Glasgow, Red Road themselves. That's what they look like from the road. The tallest residential towers in Europe at the time, before the Gallagher twins were constructed. And you can see here they're clad ready for the demolition. This is a photograph of the bingo hall that was actually at Red Road, where 350 people could go into the bingo hall and be entertained within the Red Road complex. So that's within a housing estate within a city. They've got a bingo hall just for the people there. We did SafeDem did the slab block first. I wasn't involved in the first slab block, but then afterwards they went on to do others. And this is when they appeared on the One Show.
Maggie Adarin Pocock has a slightly more drastic style, Demolition.
Yes, in the next of her dramatic series of films for the One Show, she's at the Red Road flats in Glasgow, where one of the huge towers is about to come down. Problem is, there's only a matter of metres between the buildings.
In the 50s and 60s, tower blocks were hailed as the answer to Britain's post-war housing shortage. Nowhere embraced them more than Glasgow, and none are more iconic than the Red Road flats in Springburn. When opened in 1966, the Red Road flats in Glasgow were some of the tallest residential buildings in Europe. Known as the superblocks, they housed 5,000 people. In their day, these giants were seen as beautiful and futuristic. But today, tower blocks are being brought down around the country. And one block at Red Road is next. But this tower is not going down without a fight. Blast engineer William Sinclair has found a huge challenge inside.
What we actually found on any given floor is a complete mishmash and cocktail of steel columns. Some of the steel we're encountering here, its industrial strength is absolutely thick steel.
Bringing down a building made from concrete is relatively simple. The shockwave from the explosion easily shatters the material, meaning the building can collapse and implode on itself. A steel structure is so rigid it has to be knocked over, like felling a tree. William's solution is to use two types of explosive. One to topple the steel girders over.
This is our bomb box. It's a box with dynamite sticks in there, and that's what's our kicking charge. That'll actually shift the column out of position.
And another type of explosive to slice the steel in two, called a cutter charge.
They actually form a molten jet of copper. There's a copper casing with explosive inside there, which will actually heat up and physically fire through the steel and slice it like a knife through butter.
But William and his demolition team have another major headache. The neighbouring block is only 45 metres away, and the tower is 80 metres tall. So how can they bring it down without hitting the other block? The frame of the building is made up of steel girders along the front, middle and back of the building. A third of the way up, William is going to take out the front and middle girders. On 3 floors, the explosives will slice through the steel and blow it outwards. The back girder remains to act as a hinge. The building first collapses down, reducing its height before toppling forward. This combination of explosives means that this building will topple that way, missing that building by 12 metres. Hopefully. A crowd of onlookers have come to see the end of these famous flats. But it's mixed emotions for fireman Finlay Mackay. They were home for over 20 years.
We had a fantastic time growing up here. I couldn't say a bad word about the place. I'll be really sad to see it go because it's a link to your past, and so I stayed up there with my mum and my dad. They're both now dead, so it's your kind of one of your final links going with your your parents.
But time is up for the Red Road Flats. 1/4 ton of explosives is ready to go. Well, that's the siren that's just gone off now. And I really feel for the engineers on this one, because it's a massive building and it has to come down incredibly precisely. You can really feel the tension.
That's going to hit that building. That's hit that building.
But as planned, it misses the other building by meters. Wow! I must say that took me by surprise. But it's sort of shot across and then sort of collapsed. I'm really quite proud to be an engineer seeing that.
I don't like looking at that blank space. I don't like it.
You
I'm trying really look at it. I'm a bit stunned at the speed of it.
Demolitions don't get much bigger than this, but it marks the beginning of the end of these epic towers. One down, several more to go.
You can't say that enough, can you? You just want to keep replaying.
They want to keep replaying that, which is good. The next one to go in Red Road was Burney Court, which is a block on its own over the other side of the main road to the main Red Road flats. This one's a square block, hitting the same way, a little bit like fell in a tree. So William took out 3 floors, formed a hinge at the back, and then over it came. Another great photograph from John Young here on that one. This is Burney Court on the day, 5th of May 2013.
Let's go.
Burney Court. Red Road itself, this is a great photograph by Paul Barr. This is the last phase of Red Road where we bought William Sinclair and Safety and bought down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of the blocks in one go. This is the biggest exclusion zone ever in Europe for an explosive demolition, and the most people ever evacuated for an explosive demolition. So again, William's good at breaking records.
My name is John Scordia. I am a project director at Cooper Cromer Architects.
I am Brian Smiley, Safety and Works Manager at Safety and Demolition.
I led the master planning team for this project, which consisted of landscape architects, commercial consultants with expertise in residential and retail uses, and civil engineers. I was also responsible for leading our community consultation process throughout the project.
We started off, it was for doing the demolition of all the blocks, and once we'd done the soft strip, the asbestos surveys, taking out all the timbers and all the different materials, and then getting them ready for the blowdown. After they were blown down, we had the machines in processing it all, and then it ends up with a finished article with a 6F2, which is left to get used on the site for the new builds.
I think the starting point was thorough community consultation. Red Road has a strong sense of community here, a sense of community of people that used to live here, if not live in the surrounding areas. Our process started before the demolition of the final blocks, and there was a bit of anxiety, shall we say, in the surrounding community as to how that was going to be undertaken and what was to follow. So it was very important for us to then engage with the local community organisations, shopkeepers, and other interested parties. So that was the starting point for us.
The 6F2 is a pile of aggregate that's left in certain parts of the site. It's for when the new build team come in, they use it for piling mats, and also they're digging out any ducts for laying pipes and different processes like that. They just fill in any voids while they're building. The 6F2 actually comes from the concrete, for the concrete slabs and the foundations that was in the blocks, and it's to save transporting maybe 500-600 loads off site, for the builders to bring another 500-600 loads onto site, which stops the traffic through the local area as well. That's the idea of it.
The proposals are to, once we've cleared the site, there's a lot of retained material on site. There are certain underground constraints that we need to deal with. We can platform using the existing material. And the master plan provides a framework for providing new homes that go some way to replace the homes that have been removed. But those homes are more family orientated, smaller scale, smaller height, front and back door, homes with gardens, but maybe slightly taller blocks with flatted accommodation on key corners and key aspects of the site.
The first block, that was a 15321 block along at the end, and then they done 21 Burnley Court. That got a blow down itself, and then 10, 20, 30 block, 10 Red Road Court, 123 Petershill Drive, 93 Petershill Drive, 63 Petershill Drive, and 33 Petershill Drive was all the one blow down, because they didn't want to evacuate the people again, because they'd already done it 2 times previously. So they come up with the idea of just doing the one blow down. That was to take people out of the house another 2 or 3 times.
Community feedback was very positive. Lots of people engaged with this. I think it's true that Red Road is a place that everybody's heard of. The community, the older people in the community remembered when they moved into the blocks. They have fond memories of living in these towers in the sky compared with the damp accommodation they came from. But then memories changed through time, because as soon as we proposed removing the buildings and producing something of smaller scale, that we could quite simply change the perception without throwing away the memory of Red Road, and that's what we've striven to do.
With the height and the wind and the outside of the blocks, there's always best of cement sheets round it, with to strip them for the mast climbers. So with the wind monitors and with the way, we actually taking the panels off the side, one full bay from level 1 to level 2, and weighed them. So as we knew what weight the men were and what weight the sheets were for working in the mast climbers, so as it wasn't overweight, and just stripped them bay by bay coming down, just the wind and the rain and the snow, all sorts of weather. On this it was cutting charges, and the charge for blowing it out once it's cut. We need 2 charges, a kicking charge and a cutting charge, and then all the added protection to stop any steel fragments flying out the building.
The sloping site faces south, so you have an opportunity to orientate your houses to maximise sustainability. Those connections to the surrounding areas allow us to bring in green routes, the wider green network, and create a green heart to the master plan, which we can use as a setting for creating new homes in a significantly different environment from the original homes.
So that shows Red Road as to why we're gone. Well, we're coming to an end now. Apologising for running over, but I thought you'd like to see some of the films being used. So 14 years working in Glasgow, learning new words like dreek, tedious, wearisome, damp and wet. That summed up the Glasgow weather. And many times that I've been soaked to the skin by something that didn't really feel that it was rain, but it obviously was. Scunnered, that's a great dislike. So if they didn't like something up there, they would say they were scunnered. Shugle, it's another good one, move from side to side. And glaikit, stupid. That's been used that many times. Unbelievable. We were helping to clear away the past to make way for the future. And I think that really that's the key of what I've tried to talk to you about tonight. We were a very small part of a team that were engaged by Glasgow City Council and the housing associations to remove the flats which were poor from a living standard, so that they can build new modern homes. Every night before the blowdown, we went to Tiffany's Steakhouse. Went in at 6:30, a good meal, then an early night, and then ready for 4 a.m. start on blowdown day. So that's not get up at 4 a.m. That's on site at 4 a.m. And as if you haven't had your tea tonight and you're not a vegetarian, there's a picture of 2 of the finest steaks in Glasgow that you get from Tiffany's. So a few numbers: 47 tower blocks demolished that I've been involved in. So that's quite a few. And in my career in demolition, I've been involved in the demolition of over 150 tower blocks. I can demolish other things, but I tended to have just worked on tower blocks for a while. 0 accidents, very proud of that. 0 injuries in Glasgow, very proud of that. 1 broken window pane. So I think we did a pretty good job. And 250,000 miles driven or travelled by train or plane. I know every single service area on the M6 and the M74. I know which serves the best coffee, where the cheapest petrol is, where the best toilets are. I know where the speed cameras are, because I've just travelled it so many times. Some credits, bearing in mind I'm just a very small cog in a very big wheel. So Glasgow Housing Association, New Gorbals Housing, Technical Demolition, who gave me the opportunity to work there, Coleman and Company, SafeDem, and Demmaster Demolition, and Despain. If I've got time, Ben, and hopefully you might just nod your head, or are we running over? Have I got time just to run this quick little film, or are we? Yeah, okay, give me the thumbs up. So this is a final summing up of the demolition program. If this, see how this loads, it should now go straight to weekly group. So just bear with me while we run this one. And this is a nice summing up of the whole program from GHA's point of view.
We can just see a PowerPoint at the moment, John. You might need to change the screen.
See what, sorry?
We can just see your PowerPoint at the moment. You might want to change the screen.
Oh, right, okay, 1 second. I need to stop it then. I need to just do a different screen share then, so bear with me. New share. Where are we? This one, yep. Okay, hopefully you'll now get this one. Have you now got a picture of Glasgow then?
Yep, that's working.
Okay, good. Right, sorry about this. I just need to go back to that one. That we're nearly there, nearly finished, so you can go and have a cup of tea. But I just got one or two things just to add on at the end. So, right. The credits exposes engineers. They're the ones who do all the work. They're the ones that produce the magic. All I do is assist in my own little way. William Sinclair, David Sinclair from SafeDem. Dick Green, very good friend of mine who lives in Yorkshire, gets involved in quite a few of the jobs. John Faulkner and Robin Rushforth from PDC, and John Turner. Did I enjoy my time in the city? Yes. Would I do it again? Yes. Did it make me a film star? No. But our work was featured in a Hollywood movie, but only over the credits of Trainspotting 2 by Danny Boyle. This is the last film. This is almost the end, so. Teamwork pays off, that's all I can say. So I know it's probably a bit late for questions. I apologise for running over, but that's it, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll hand you back to Ben.
Thank you, John. That was really interesting. Yeah, it's so interesting to have such a look at something you don't often think about. You know, buildings come and go all the time, but I can't say I've ever put much thought into not only the technical side of what goes on, but the emotional stories. You know, really interesting, those films at the start that you showed about how it really affects people's lives and the connections people have to their places of living over all those years. So yeah, thank you so much. I found that interesting. We have run over a little ways, so but I think it'd still be polite to at least offer the audience a chance to ask just one question. So if anybody wants to stick their hand up and ask something to John before we sign off for the evening, I offer you all that opportunity.
No, they've all gone to bed. They're all,
Everyone's ready.
I've tried them all out. Right? So.
Well, it will be an evening well rested and lots to think about. So I invite everyone to come off microphone and join me in giving John a round of applause. Thanks so much, John.
Thank you.
It's absolutely terrific to have you with us. This time next month, we'll be into May time, and we're going to have Edward Burdack with us. So we're going to be looking at the theory of flight will be the next talk. So again, looking at a nice combination of history and science. So yep, John, thank you so much. Thank you very much, everyone that joined us this evening, both on Zoom and on YouTube, and we will see you again this time next month. Have a good one, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
John. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.